how it became covered with the limestone and how it was remodeled over 10,000 years ago. It was stripped of its limestone later on, and it's been remodeled a couple of times apparently after that, but its origin was over 73,000 years back and had nothing to do with the Egyptians. The Egyptians, of which King Seljuk was an Egyptian, was responsible for resurfacing and recoating it with limestone. Hence, this is probably where the idea that the Egyptians actually built it came from. They didn't really build it. They just kind of remodeled it. Another thing that Edward was thinking about was horses and animals, and she picked that out of his thoughts too, and commented that the horse did not originate in Europe, as modern scientists and archaeology think, but actually the horse originated on the continent of America. That there was, way back over 50,000 years ago, there was a large settlement of extraterrestrials, and this was the time period of Plejaren, his people. They brought the horse to Earth, and because this was the continent that they lived on, and that the horse then was very common and very popular on the American continent. The great wars that broke out later on and destructed that area, the horses on the American continent all disappeared, leaving the horses that were also in the European and Asian continent, leading archaeologists to believe that that's where the horse originated, but it didn't. It actually originated in America. And she said the horse back then was called a Hipparion, or Hyperion. I'm not sure exactly how it would be pronounced. It's Hipparion. She says, as evidence of some of the great wars and some of the very destructive devices that had been used by ETs in the past on Earth, we could look to Death Valley. The Death Valley was the scene of a great war at one time where terrible weapons that dissolve things were used at that time, and that's why it's all flat and out there. The dissolving weapons, literally just some sort of particle beam something or other that they used. Unlike just an explosion where you blow things to bits, these weapons just dissolved things and they were gone. Okay, at this point, we're at a point after 6 days where they've been on several travels through historic times and so forth that Ascot explains to Edward and to Jitsi that she feels that they are now both very prepared to go back into the time of Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, and that their education at this point now should serve them well, so they will better understand, and it is time for Edward to actually meet Emmanuel. At this point on the tapes, I was a little quandary whether or not I should go on with this or not, but what I'm going to do is I'm not going to continue on with the time travel back into the year 32 right here with Edward, because I want to tie that together with the rest of the information about the Talmud of Manuel, the writings of Manuel, on two separate tapes. And those are in your tape set. So what I'll do here is I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about the general overview and what happened to Jitsi, and then we'll go over it again more in detail, and I'll tell you all about the conversation that young Edward's going to have with Emmanuel on the other tape set. Well, they do go back to the year 32. They're there for 4 days. When they get there, you have Ascot, Edward, and Jitsi is still with him. By this time, Jitsi has had a major mind change about life and what is real in creation and what's really historically gone down on our planet. He's seen the truth of things now for quite some time, and a lot of changes have gone on in his head, so he's pretty much ready now to make a trip back to the year 32 also. They make the trip. They're there for 4 days. One of the problems that Billy had was his hair. He had just had a haircut before they had gone on this trip and had short hair, which apparently was very unusual in those times. That most people just let their hair grow all the time, and I suppose they did because they really didn't have barbers, or it was just the style at the time to let your hair grow. And not to mention, many people believe that long hair facilitates personal strength. And I think that was a belief during those time periods. It was probably just an excuse not to get a haircut. But for whatever reason, most people had long hair at the time, and so it was out of place. So Ascot got some robes that had hoods on it, kind of like a monk sort of look, and that's what they wore during the time period. And because the language at the time, Aramaic, they did not understand, they were still using language translators around their belt so they could understand people of the time they were in. They were there for 4 days. I don't know exactly where they sat down, but they wandered around from area to area and wound up close to the Mount of Olives, where Edward does have a conversation with Emmanuel. Jitchi's with them all the time, taking all of this in. When they actually get there, Jitchi gets very nervous about the fact that he's actually going to meet Jesus Christ. And this could be a very heavy thing for someone who has worshipped and has had the concept for years that this man, Jesus Christ, is actually the Lord of the universe and the creator of all men and all the other, things that are exaggerated by a Christian religion. When in fact, he was just a real man like the rest of us. And now it's turning out that he wasn't even called Jesus Christ, he was really called Emmanuel. So when they get there, Jitchi is kind of overcome and he's getting excited again. He's getting a little out of hand. And Ascot and Edward and Jitchi are standing by the road, and Emmanuel and his followers are walking towards them. And Jitchi's going a little berserk, he's getting a little excited. He's losing control a little bit. And Edward just pops him once right on the nose, gives him a short chop right in the face. And Jitchi just calms right down and his nose is bleeding a little bit. And Ascot thought that was the most unusual way to handle human behavior. And it was about that time that Emmanuel walks up, who seemed to be expecting the talks, says hello to Ascot. Apparently he had known Ascot and been visited by her several times before, and turns to Jitchi very calmly and suggests that Jitchi go over and sit down with his followers who are sitting down beside the road there, and that they would take care of him. And they do stay there for a while, and Edward has his conversation, which we'll go into in length on the other tape. And then they get back into the ship and they return. Jitchi, other than that, does not speak with Emmanuel. Just met him for a moment there, was about it. And they return in the ship and they go back to Jordan, where they never really see Jitchi again. And so Jitchi got an opportunity there just by virtue of being in the right time at the right place. He got to see a lot and go on the travels with him for that entire 6-day time. Okay, we're going to move forward in time on our own here now. We've been talking about Edward's travels with Ascot back in the year 1956. After those travels, he continued on and went into India and roamed around many different countries. He had a few other contacts with Ascot, and there are some old pictures in black and white in India that Billy took of her ship and inside of her ship looking down at the earth. Those pictures aren't too common, they're not too common around, and I generally show them in my slideshow because people really haven't seen them very much.
Sure.
But his contacts after a while with Ascot were mostly telepathic towards the end, and then he didn't see her again for the longest period of time, except of course when he was reunited with her for just a small while he visited the great spacer of the Plejadians. Well, let's move back up now. We're up to 1975 again, October 20th, and Billy's having his 36th contact that has gone on now since over a 10-month period. So it's been 10 months and he's had 36 contacts, so that you can see they're happening quite regularly here. All in all, there's going to be over 135 of them before they actually stop. Okay, he's now having contacts with Semyasi. He's now known as Billy, so I can remember to call him Billy all the time instead of Edward. Beginning in 1975, he started using the name Billy for everything. Okay? At this particular contact, Semyasi seems to be a little upset, and because numerous times they've quizzed Billy about his public speaking, and Billy keeps saying he's gonna, and then he says he's not gonna. That he's just not cut out for it and he can't do it, so he's going to get his friend Hans Jacob to do it. And he's been working with Hans apparently to do some public speaking. And Billy writes his speeches out word for word, more or less, so Hans can read them, I suppose, is the general idea. And they've been working on some speeches, and Hans apparently is kind of chickening out and has written a letter back to Billy. And the letter he would like for Billy to take to Semyasi and read to her, because it's stating all the reasons that he doesn't want to do the speaking. In particular, most of the reason is the fact